So today we're going to talk about two parts. That's good. Everyone good? Okay. How many Jews does it take to work? Okay. Today we're going to talk about two parts of Albert Einstein. My discussion is going to be in two parts. The first part is about Einstein's head, and the second part is about Einstein's heart. So again, that's Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. And before I get going, I should point out I am the least likely person to write a book about Albert Einstein. I am not a scientist. I failed science in high school and college. I like to call myself a likable idiot. The only things I knew about Einstein growing up was probably what most of you knew about Einstein growing up. The Nobel Prize, the theory of relativity, whatever that means. The wild shock of white hair that looks like he stuck his finger in an electrical socket. That's what I knew about Albert Einstein. Until one day I heard a story that sent me down a rabbit hole and got me really fascinated with Albert Einstein, and I want to start today by sharing that story with you. And remember how I said today we're going to talk about Einstein's head and Einstein's heart? Well, today we're literally going to talk about Einstein's head, Einstein's skull. We're literally going to talk about Einstein's skull. Hopefully you finished your breakfast. So the story starts on April 18th, 1955. Albert Einstein, 76 years old, dies. And he is in the Princeton Hospital, and the pathologist is called in to perform the autopsy. This is the pathologist, Dr. Thomas Harvey. He performs the autopsy. And when he's finished performing the autopsy, when nobody is looking, he takes a saw and cracks open Albert Einstein's skull, reaches inside, and steals Albert Einstein's brain. This is a true story. Somebody stole Albert Einstein's brain. I like to call it the greatest heist of the 20th century. And then he goes outside and gives a press conference, and he does not tell anybody that he stole the brain. He just tells everybody the usual autopsy stuff. Einstein died of a ruptured aortic aneurysm in his stomach, and he didn't mention that he stole the brain. So first I should say, he took the brain not because he was a crazy guy. Maybe he was a crazy guy, but the reason he took the brain was as follows. We all know Albert Einstein was one of the greatest minds of the 20th century, greatest scientists of our many generations. And he wanted to study Einstein's brain. And here he is face to face, just a few feet away from Einstein's brain. And he said it would be a waste not to take the brain and to study the brain and to see if we can understand what makes someone smart, what makes someone a genius. So that was his logic about why he stole the brain. The rest of Einstein did not want his grave to become a celebrity attraction. So Einstein was cremated, and most of his ashes were tossed over the Delaware River. The rest, the brain, was not cremated. And this doctor took the brain and took it home with him, put it in a mason jar, and put it on top of the mantle in his living room at home, where it stayed for many years. And then eventually his wife said, "Honey, could you move Einstein's brain out of the living room? It's kind of grossing the kids out." And so, being a good husband, he took the brain, brought it into the basement, put it in a beer cooler. Albert Einstein's brain was in a beer cooler for decades. 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. It was in his basement for decades, lost to history. Now, I said he's a pathologist and he wanted to study the brain. Pathologists really don't know how to study brains, they know how to do autopsies. And this is the days before the internet. He couldn't just Google brain researcher. So anytime he would visit a city, he would look at the local yellow pages and try to look up and see if there was a brain researcher at a local university. And he'd write down their name and address, and when he got back home, he would cut off a little piece of the brain, maybe the size of like a little cookie, and put it in the mail, the regular US postal mail, and send it unsolicited to all these brain professors. So I can imagine they walk into their office one day, they go to the mailbox, and there's a piece of smelly envelope that says, "Here's Albert Einstein's brain." So pieces of Albert Einstein's brain have ended up all over the globe, in Tokyo, in Honolulu, in Buenos Aires. If you're ever in the States, you can actually see a tiny piece of Albert Einstein's brain. One of the researchers who got a piece was a doctor in Philadelphia, and when she retired, she donated her tiny piece to the Mutter Museum, which is in downtown Philadelphia. and they have a small exhibit there where you can actually see a tiny, tiny piece of Albert Einstein's brain. So when I heard this story, I thought to myself, wow, this is a crazy story about Albert Einstein that I never heard of. No teacher growing up, when we were learning about Albert Einstein in school, no teacher told us this story, right? What else is there about Albert Einstein that I don't know? There must be so many things. Of course, again, I'm not a scientist. There are lots of things about Albert Einstein I don't understand. Physics and black holes and gravitational waves. Yeah, I can make up words right now, but there's lots of things about Albert Einstein I don't know, but I wanted to learn to see what other things, just for the likable idiot, the average Joe, could learn from Albert Einstein. And so I set off on this journey to find out. And so, as I said at the beginning, I'm a journalist with The Forward. The Forward's been around since 1897. They actually interviewed Albert Einstein on many occasions. They actually interviewed, I don't know if this is a legend or not, but apparently I was told by the archivist at The Forward that the Forward interviewed Einstein's mother. And they asked Einstein's mother, did you think your son Albert would grow up to be such a great man? And she said, I thought he'd be garnished, which is Yiddish for, zilch or nothing. This is what the archivist at The Forward sent me. If you look at the headline, Albert Einstein Mama, something, something, and the last word is garnished. This was front page news. It must have been a slow news day. Nothing else was happening that day. Right, even Albert Einstein couldn't impress his Jewish mother. So, we have different kinds of reporters. We have, politics reporters, we have sports reporters. I decided I wanted to be an Einstein reporter and write, articles somehow related, somehow connected to Albert Einstein. And so, I set up, I'll tell you a little trick of the trade that journalists use. There's something called a Google News Alert. If you are interested in a person or in a topic, you can set up a Google News Alert. And anytime that person is in the news, Google will send you an email with a link to that article. So I set up a Google News Alert for Albert Einstein, and I figured, okay, maybe once or twice a month, Google will send me a link to an Einstein article. To my surprise, they sent me 8-10 articles a day that mention Albert Einstein. So first of all, there's a lot of modern-day current scientists who are working today, who are working to further Einstein's research. As a matter of fact, since the year 2000, so in the last 24 years, 5 of the Nobel Prizes in physics have been awarded to scientists working with Einstein's theories. So even today, he's still very much a part of the scientific community. But it's not just scientists. Google News started sending me all sorts of bizarre articles about Albert Einstein. So for example, there is a large Einstein memorabilia market. People love to collect things that once belonged to Albert Einstein. Einstein famously smoked a pipe. His pipe went up for auction a few years ago. It sold for like $1 million. Einstein famously wore this leather Levi's jacket. He loved this leather Levi's jacket. It's kind of funny. He's this, schlubby German Jewish scientist trying to be this James Dean all-American cool guy with this leather jacket. But he wore it all the time with him. And not too long ago, this leather jacket from Levi's went up for auction. And you want to guess who bought it at auction? Levi's. Levi's bought it at auction so they could put it in the Levi's Museum. And the curator of the Levi's Museum, there she is with the jacket, she said when she opened up the box, the jacket still smells from all the tobacco smoke. Because it still, had so much tobacco smoke from Einstein out there. A couple of years ago, it was the largest ever Einstein auction. They found 54 pages of Einstein's writings of him trying to come up with the theory of relativity. So it's very, it's a very sought-after document. And it sold in Paris at Sotheby's auction house. Anyone want to guess for how much it sold for? 5 million, 24 million? 30 shekels? Oh, there it is. It sold for over $11 million. It was great. People thought it would go for a couple million. I was watching it. They were streaming it online. I was watching it. The whole thing took like a half hour. It was like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. It was crazy. One other interesting person I met, finding, I started to become obsessed with Albert Einstein, and I started finding other people that were obsessed with Albert Einstein. So I met this guy, I write about him in my book, this guy in Connecticut who has the Guinness World Record for the largest collection of celebrity hair. Okay? So he claims to have some tuft of bloody hair from Abe Lincoln from the night Abe Lincoln was shot. I don't know how you could prove that. He does have, this is true, he does have some of astronaut Neil Armstrong's hair that he bought off of Neil Armstrong's barber. And when Neil Armstrong found out, he tried to sue this guy. Anyway, I showed up to this guy's house in Connecticut, and he opens a filing cabinet, pulls out a Ziploc bag full of white hair, and he goes, "This is Albert Einstein's hair." Again, I don't know if it's true or not. So I started writing articles, little fun articles that I'm talking to you about now, about the guy who has Einstein's hair and the guy who stole Einstein's brain, and I started writing all these articles. Eventually, I got a phone call from the Albert Einstein Archives, which is based here in Israel. They're at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And I'll explain later in today's talk why they're at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, as well as Einstein's connection with Israel. So the Einstein Archives called me up, and I'm a little worried. Maybe they're a bunch of serious academics. Maybe they're calling me up to say, "Hey, could you stop writing about the brain? Could you stop writing about the hair?" But to my surprise, they said something very interesting. So the Einstein Archives is made up mostly of academics and physicists and serious scientific researchers. They have all of Einstein's documents there, and other scientists come from all over the world to look at Einstein's documents to see what new things they can learn. So when social media started, 15, 20 years ago, all of the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, reserved pages for dead celebrities. Okay? They did not want, John Doe in his basement to run the Elvis Presley page, right? So they gave the Elvis Presley page to the Elvis Presley estate, to Graceland, and the Elvis Presley estate can do with what they want. They can post old pictures of Elvis Presley, they can sell Elvis Presley t-shirts, they can do whatever they want, but they reserve those pages for the estates of all of these dead celebrities, because they didn't want other people, pretending to be those dead celebrities. So they gave the official Albert Einstein page on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to the Einstein Archives at Hebrew University. So they called me up in the archives and they said, "Listen, you seem to know a lot of strange things about Albert Einstein. We have these, social media pages. Would you want to manage and run those social media accounts?" I was like, "Sure, that would be like a fun side job." So I spent like an hour a day. Doing it. Albert Einstein has more than 20 million fans on social media. Okay, to put that in perspective, Albert Einstein has more Facebook fans than Tom Hanks. Okay? There are other dead celebrities on social media. Marilyn Monroe occasionally offers some fashion advice on Twitter, but not too often. John Wayne is on Twitter, but he rarely has anything to say. But as Albert Einstein, as you can tell because I love talking about Albert Einstein so much, I post a lot to Albert Einstein's social media pages. He is by far the most active dead celebrity on social media. I post upwards of 8 times a day. And so I'm posting a lot of science stories, I'm posting a lot of weird stories. But what I'm also posting, I have some regular features. This is an Instagram page. So I post, for example, the Einstein Archives gave me hundreds of old photographs of Albert Einstein, many of which have never been seen before. So every Thursday I do a feature called Throwback Thursday, where I show an old photo of Albert Einstein. So here's Einstein and his wife Elsa and President Harding at the White House in the U.S. Here's a photo of Albert Einstein on top of Rockefeller Plaza in New York. So I share these old photos, so that's just one thing I do. I also, obviously, Albert Einstein is known for his quotations. You were talking to me earlier about his quotations. So every Wednesday I do a feature called Wednesday Wisdom, where I share one of Albert Einstein's inspirational quotations. And then on Friday I do something called Fan Art Friday. Many of these 20 million people send me their own art that they made of Albert Einstein. And so I choose one each Friday, and I share that with the 20 million fans. So here's one. Some of them are really good, you'll see. catch up to my notes. Okay, so the question is, why does Albert Einstein have 20 million fans, right? Shakespeare doesn't have 20 million fans, right? Why does Einstein have 20 million fans? So, I think there's many reasons why Einstein is so famous. We could probably spend all day talking about that. I'll just spend a few minutes talking about why I think Albert Einstein is so famous. First of all, he came about at a moment in time when all of modern media was just coming into place. You had photographs, radio, newspaper, magazines, even television was around in Einstein's era. And Einstein really played into this. You know, he had this beloved Zadie-like, quality to him. I don't know how many of you saw Oppenheimer last summer, right? So Oppenheimer, who was a colleague of Einstein's, Oppenheimer, actually I have a picture, I think, of the two of them. Here's a picture at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. Oppenheimer, as you saw in that movie, was a very serious guy, right? Suit and tie and a hat, never joked around, very serious guy. Albert Einstein was the exact opposite. He would wear clothes with holes in them, baggy clothes. He sometimes would walk around Princeton in his pajamas, and he didn't like to wear socks. He sometimes wore his wife's shoes. Slippers? Yeah. So he was a very laid-back guy, and he was also very approachable. Kids would literally, when Einstein would be walking down the street in Princeton, kids would tug on his shoulder and say, "Dr. Einstein, can you help me with my science homework?" And he would help them with their science homework. He was just very approachable. He'd get fan mail, people would write him letters, he'd write them back. And he became kind of this myth. You know, a lot of historians call him the first modern-day celebrity, because he was world famous. He was very good friends with Charlie Chaplin, Einstein and Chaplin, and so, as a matter of fact, Chaplin and Einstein once went to a Hollywood red carpet premiere. It was actually one of Chaplin's movies. That's Einstein, Chaplin, and Einstein's wife, Elsa. And on the red carpet, all of the journalists wanted to interview Einstein and not Chaplin. And they couldn't even understand anything Einstein was saying. He has a thick German accent. Another great story, Einstein and his wife Elsa went to Japan in early 1923. Einstein was already famous. He had won the Nobel Prize a year earlier. And they check into the hotel. They step out on the balcony, and down below there are tens of thousands of people staring up at the balcony just to get a glimpse of Albert Einstein, right? And the paparazzi would chase Albert Einstein down the street. And this is another great story. Whenever Einstein would write a new paper, Macy's, the department store in Manhattan, would put a copy of the paper, they would paste it in the front window display. You know, like it was the birth of a royal baby announcement or something. He knew also that when the paparazzi, the journalists would chase him and take pictures, he knew what would make a great photo for the next day's paper. He would often take his hat and toss it in the air. It was like a cute little photo of him doing that. Marie Curie never took her hat off and tossed it in the air, right? So that's some of the reasons I think why Einstein is so famous. So one of the things I like to share with Einstein's 20 million fans is not just these bizarre stories about Einstein, but I like to show them how Einstein is still relevant to them today. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of modern-day technology that we have that comes courtesy of Albert Einstein, and you may not realize it. So for example, if I say Alexander Graham Bell, you say a telephone. If I say Albert Einstein, it's a little harder to pick an invention. What did he invent? Because a lot of what he did was just theories in his mind and math equations in his mind. But I'm here to tell you a few things that he did invent. My favorite example of this is GPS, right? The global positioning system, we all use Waze. Many of us use Waze to get here today. So the way, I'm going to give you, I'm not going to fully explain GPS, again, because I'm not a scientist, but I'll give you the 30-second Einstein for Dummies version of how GPS works. You have three pieces of information. You're in your car, you're driving, and you're moving. Unless you're in Beit Shemesh, Beit Shemesh traffic. You're moving in your car. You're on planet Earth, and Earth is spinning. And the satellite in space is floating around space, moving around. So we have three things that are in constant motion: the satellite, the Earth, and you in your car. And Einstein's theory of relativity is an elegant mathematical equation that makes all three of those pieces of data work together. Without Einstein's theory of relativity, you would veer off the road, you'd get lost. The theory of relativity is the foundation of how GPS works. Think about that the next time, you get a pizza delivered to your house. The driver found your house thanks to Albert Einstein, right? What has Galileo done for you lately? Nothing, right? If you Google the inventor of GPS, when you get home today, Google who invented GPS, 2 names will pop up. Albert Einstein, because of what we just discussed, and a woman named Gladys Mae West. Did anyone here see the movie Hidden Figures a few years ago? Right, so Hidden Figures was about these women in the 1960s who kind of acted as, they called them human computers, doing a lot of the math problems for engineers at NASA. They were the hidden figures behind the scenes. The Asian scholars. And so Gladys Mae West was one of these hidden figures. She worked at the US Navy in the 1960s. And they had just sent the satellite into space, and they were trying to figure out where it was. And Gladys Mae West was the first person to realize you can apply Albert Einstein's theory of relativity to the satellite in space. And so she and Einstein, therefore, are credited with inventing GPS. So I called her up, and I interviewed her for my book. She's in her 90s. My book, The Einstein Effect, for sale after today's event. Happy to autograph it for you. She said to me something very funny. She said, Benyamin, I don't even use GPS. I like the old-fashioned maps that you can fold. So that was interesting. So another invention that Einstein created that you use every day is as follows. So Einstein in 1905, Einstein accomplished so much in 1905 that historians simply call it Einstein's miracle year, because he was so productive. And he was only 26 years old. He peaked very early. And it was at a very interesting moment in time in his life. He had just graduated college, and his dream was to become a physics professor. Not one school would hire him. Yeah, they say maybe he wasn't a great student, or he didn't like authority figures. Nobody wanted to hire him. So he was desperate for a job. He even put out classified ads in the newspaper and said, "Hi, I'm Albert Einstein. I'll be happy to tutor your kid in algebra, high school math." Can you imagine having Einstein as your high school math tutor? Eventually, through a family friend, he got a job at the patent office in Bern, Switzerland. Basically, he was just reviewing patents all day. And at night, after a full day's work, when his wife and kid were sleeping, he wrote 4 scientific papers which revolutionized the way we look at the world. That was 1905, Einstein's miracle year. There are entire college courses about Einstein's miracle year. I'm not the guy who teaches them, but I'll tell you just one interesting tidbit. The first paper he wrote about was something called the photoelectric effect. The photoelectric effect, again, basically Einstein for Dummies, is it turns light particles into energy. The easiest way to think about this is when you're using your remote control, and you hit a button on your remote control and a light comes out and it changes the channel on your TV. That's the photoelectric effect. So when you go home today and you're watching Netflix and you hit pause or volume, you have Einstein to thank for that, because that's how remote controls work. When you go to the grocery store, you know the self-checkout and the laser, and you scan your cereal box over that? The photoelectric effect is making that happen where the light can read that information. When you walk into the grocery store and you step on the mat and the glass doors open up, that's the photoelectric effect. So many things that we use today use the photoelectric effect, and it's all thanks to Albert Einstein. Many people associate Einstein with the theory of relativity, E equals mc squared, but he won the Nobel Prize for the photoelectric effect. That was like, in essence, his biggest accomplishment. Okay, so I said today I'm going to talk about 2 parts of Albert Einstein, Einstein's head and Einstein's heart. And so we talked about Einstein's head. Literally, we started by talking about Einstein's brain, and then we talked about some of the ideas that came out of Einstein's head. Now I want to pivot and talk about Einstein's heart. Don't worry, to my knowledge, nobody actually stole Einstein's heart. When I say Einstein's heart, I mean Einstein's humanitarian side. Einstein was a mensch among men, and I want to talk about that for a few minutes. So we all know Einstein was a German scientist. As a matter of fact, as the Nazis rose to power, Albert Einstein was the most famous Jew in all of Germany. Here's a picture of Einstein in Berlin. And there were actually, the Nazis put a $5,000 bounty on Einstein's head. And there were at least 2 assassination attempts on Albert Einstein. And so by the early 1930s, Einstein realized that it was time to leave Germany, and he was able to escape to America thanks to something called the EB-1 visa. the EB-1 visa is for people of high academic achievement. America was making it easier for professors from all over the world to move to America because American schools wanted the best and the brightest, and so they made it easier with this visa to make foreign professors able to move to America. So Einstein came on an EB-1 visa. After Einstein came, America changed the name. It's not called the EB-1 visa, it's called the Einstein visa now. To this day, today, people are still coming to the United States on an Einstein visa. Now, I should say they've lowered the standard. You don't have to be someone of high academic achievement. You just have to be anyone of high achievement. So, for example, a lot of professional athletes who want to play sports in the United States come to America on an Einstein visa. So to this day, people are still using the Einstein visa. So when Einstein gets to America, he wants to do everything he can to help rescue his fellow German Jews from the Holocaust. And so he wants to get visas for other German Jews. Now it takes a couple things to get a visa at that time. You had to have connections. Einstein was very well connected. We saw the picture of him as the president. You also had to have money to grease the wheels. And Einstein did not have a lot of money. Contrary to popular belief, he was not a wealthy man. Matter of fact, he won some money from the Nobel Prize, but he had a very bitter divorce from his first wife, and she asked for the Nobel Prize money in the divorce. So he didn't even have that when he came to America. But he used whatever power and influence he did to get Jews to all sorts of random places around America. As the 1930s progressed, America started closing its doors and not letting in as many Jews. And so by the time Einstein was helping, he got Jews to Alaska. There are Jews today whose families are there thanks to Albert Einstein. Mexico, there are Jews thanks to Albert Einstein, so he helped out. The biggest thing Einstein did, though, in 1933 was he launched the International Rescue Committee. The International Rescue Committee is a humanitarian aid organization, a refugee aid organization, and it was launched by Einstein to help rescue Jews from the Holocaust. And they were successful, to a point, rescuing lots of Jews. The interesting thing about the International Rescue Committee is, was 80 years later, it's still around today. The group that Einstein started is still around today. They are one of the world's largest refugee aid organizations operating today. They're still helping save lives. So, for example, remember in 2022, February 22, when Russia invaded Ukraine, right? We read all the stories of all these Ukrainians needed to flee their country, and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians fled into the surrounding countries. Einstein's group, the International Rescue Committee, was one of those groups helping rescue people. For my book, I actually interviewed this woman. She's a Jewish Ukrainian woman. Her name is Hannah. And she was rescued by Einstein's group out of Ukraine and into Moldova. And I interviewed her, and she said, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for Albert Einstein. Right? So here's a modern-day woman whose life was saved because of Albert Einstein. She called Einstein an instrument of God, is the way she referred to it. So, as I said, the International Rescue Committee is a very large organization, a global organization, and as you know, many global organizations have celebrity spokespeople, to kind of draw attention to the group and, draw awareness to the group. And so the person who is the celebrity spokesperson for the International Rescue Committee, unfortunately it can't be Einstein because he's dead, is actor Mandy Patinkin, Jewish actor Mandy Patinkin. You may know Mandy from his various TV shows. He also performs great Yiddish concerts. He's a great singer. He performs Yiddish concerts. And he's a big activist, and his cause is helping Einstein's group. And he walks the walk. He doesn't just, say, hi, I'm a spokesperson, and go back home. He's traveled the globe with the International Rescue Committee, visiting refugees all over the world, in Africa, in Syria, all over the world. He travels with the International Rescue Committee, drawing attention to Einstein's work with refugees. So I had the wonderful opportunity to interview Mandy for my book. Again, there's a chapter about it in the book. And it was over Zoom. It was during COVID. We were supposed to speak for like a half hour, but he was very generous with his time. We ended up speaking for almost 2 hours. And I thought, okay, that would be the end of my conversation with Mandy. I'd never hear from him again. I'm going to tell you a funny behind-the-scenes story. After the book came out, my phone rings one Sunday morning, and I look at the caller ID, and it says Mandy Patinkin on it. And I answer the phone, and he's like, Benyamin, I just read your book. Oh, it's such a good book. I really love that you devoted a chapter to Einstein's International Rescue Committee and the good work that we're doing helping refugees. Hopefully people will read the book and it'll draw attention to Einstein's humanitarian work. He goes, I'll do whatever I can to help promote your book. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just kidding. Yeah, he goes, I'll do whatever I can to help promote your book. And so what we did was we got together in October. We did an event together, me and Mandy, where we were on stage in Manhattan, at a theater in Manhattan, where he and I were on stage talking about Einstein's humanitarian work. Have a picture of it? Yeah. Here's me and Mandy on stage. I gotta say, I felt like a kid who had won like a Make-A-Wish Foundation prize. Like, I should not be on stage with like, this famous guy. He's holding up some eggs. I bought him some eggs from my chickens. That's what he's holding up. But it was a really like a pinch me moment. My some of my family was in the audience. My parents were in the audience. I invited so I come from a rabbinic family. My dad's a rabbi, all my brothers are rabbis, and one of my sisters married a rabbi. It's kind of a little bit about what my first book is about, if you're interested. But anyway, I invited two of my rabbinic brothers to the Mandy event, and I should not have let them be alone backstage with Mandy for 2 minutes, because when I came back, one of my rabbinic brothers, who runs a Jewish nonprofit in Manhattan, was asking Mandy for a donation. That's the one in the back. The one in the front, my other brother, Donnie, is a pulpit rabbi in Connecticut, and he was trying to get Mandy to join the shul. I was like, guys, please stop embarrassing me. Helping rescue fellow Jews from the Holocaust was not the only humanitarian project that Einstein worked on. He worked on many humanitarian projects. I'll tell you a couple more. He was very involved in the civil rights movement. When Einstein moved to America, he had just left Germany, and he saw what nativism and nationalism could lead to, and he saw what happened when you treat a minority group, less than. And he comes to America and he sees what's happening with racism, and it boggles his mind. He wants to help with the civil rights movement. So he got very much involved in that. He traveled around the country with the NAACP, which is a big civil rights organization, helping them raise money for the NAACP. He spoke at Lincoln University. Lincoln University was the first college to offer degrees to African American students, and Einstein gave a guest lecture there. I love that, Jack. Huh? Yeah. And they also invited him to speak at the commencement address in 1946. And he said, I will not stand idly by and watch this happen. And he did whatever he could to help the cause of civil rights. There was a student in Princeton who couldn't afford tuition. Einstein, whatever money he could put together, he paid for that student's tuition, an African-American student. My favorite story about Einstein and the civil rights movement is as follows. I don't know if you're familiar with a famous opera singer, Marian Anderson, famous African-American opera singer. Einstein loved music, by the way. He played the violin, played the piano. And so Marian Anderson was invited to perform a concert in Princeton. And so, of course, Einstein goes to the concert, and he's so excited, he's like a fan. Afterwards, he goes and meets her backstage. That's Marian Anderson in the middle, there's Einstein off to the side. He meets her backstage, and he's just like having a great, fan conversation with Marian Anderson. And she's like, oh, why don't you walk with me? I'm walking to my hotel down the street. So they go for a walk from the theater to the hotel. It was the Nassau Inn, which is the main hotel in Princeton University, if you've ever been there. It's still the main hotel in Princeton. It's like on the main street there. And they go to check into, and she goes to check into the Nassau Inn, and the front desk says, sorry, you cannot stay here. It's a whites-only hotel. They wouldn't let her stay there. And so Einstein's like, come on, I'm a local celebrity. You know who I am. Please, let her stay here. No, sorry, Dr. Einstein, we can't let her stay here. That's the rules. So Einstein only lived about a half a mile walk from the hotel to his house. For someone who invented GPS, Einstein was horrible with directions. He never got his driver's license. There are great stories of Einstein. He used to love to go sailing. It was very relaxing for him. And he'd often get lost at sea, and kids would have to tug his boat back in. Anyway, so Einstein and Marian Anderson walked, because he didn't have a car. They walked from the hotel to half a mile to Einstein's house, and she stayed at Einstein's house that night, and they remained lifelong friends. As a matter of fact, a couple years ago, there was an off-Broadway play that was made about this story I just told you, about the friendship between Marian Anderson and Albert Einstein. Here's a picture of these two actors playing in that play. One other humanitarian cause that Einstein worked on was he hated war. You know, he called himself a militant pacifist, was the way he referred to himself. He never served in the army. When he was a young German, he didn't serve in the German army. When he was a young Swiss, he didn't serve in the Swiss army. So he hated war. He couldn't understand why people were fighting, and so he spoke out vociferously against war. One of the things he did towards the end of his life is he got together with his friend Bertrand Russell, who's a famous British philosopher, and together they wrote a paper. It's known as the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, and it's all about stopping the spread of nuclear weapons. And in it they write, "We are not members of this nation or that nation. We are all human beings." That's what they wrote. It was written about 2 weeks before Einstein died. And so you think about it, zooming out now. At the end of the 20th century, the year 1999-2000, Time magazine is trying to decide who to choose for the cover of the Person of the Century for Time magazine. And so obviously you have a lot of options. You could choose JFK, MLK, Gandhi, Princess Diana, the Beatles, right? There's a lot of choices from the 20th century. But they chose Albert Einstein. And I think, obviously we all know him, he's a great scientist, and that probably would be enough. He changed the way we look at the world. But I think they chose him also because he was this great humanitarian, and because he was this man for all seasons, and he was so much more well-rounded than just a famous scientist, but he was kind of a man of the globe. So, before I close today, I do want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Einstein's connection to Israel. So, Einstein was a staunch Zionist. He witnessed what happened in the Holocaust, and he realized, the importance of the Jewish state. Matter of fact, Einstein, 1921, I think, I have the next slide, 1921. In 1921, Einstein was living in Berlin, had never been to the United States, and his friend Chaim Weizmann says, listen, we're making a little delegation. We're going to the United States to raise money for a new state of Israel, for this new Jewish state. Would you come with us and help raise money? And so Einstein said, sure. And this is a picture of the four of them arriving in America in 1921 to raise money for Israel. That was Einstein's first trip to America. Einstein came to Israel for 12 days in early 1923, and while he was here, he was very much interested in Hebrew University, being an academic, and he wanted to do whatever he could to support Hebrew University, which had not launched yet, and so he became a co-founder of Hebrew University. So if you walk into Hebrew University today, and they have like the wall of founders, Einstein's face is right up there. Albert Einstein is one of the co-founders of Hebrew University. And he left, so therefore he left his entire estate. When Einstein died, he left his entire estate to Hebrew University. Many people associate Einstein with Princeton, but he left his estate to Hebrew U. To this day, if you buy an Einstein t-shirt, or an Einstein coffee mug, or an Einstein mouse pad, Hebrew University makes a few shekels. Right? So there was a gift from Einstein that keeps on giving. And he left to Hebrew University 85,000 documents, a treasure trove of documents. A lot of it is his scientific writings, but also a lot of it is letters. Like I said, Einstein was so popular, he got all this fan mail from kids, from all sorts of everyday people. I saw a great letter at the archives. It was from a plumber in New York who writes Albert Einstein and says, Dr. Einstein, if physics doesn't work out, we'd love to have you join our plumbing company in Manhattan. The interesting thing about these letters is, so you think, okay, great, we have all this fan mail. And Einstein would often write them back and become pen pals with these people. But we don't have the outgoing letters, because he would write the letters and he'd send them out to the plumber, to the kid. But many of his outgoing letters we do have, and that's because his secretary, Helen Dukas, was very clever. When she was typing up some of these letters, she typed them up on carbon copy paper. So one copy went out to the recipient, and one copy stayed with Einstein, and eventually ended up at Hebrew University. So Hebrew University is a wonderful treasure trove of these letters. Hebrew University is also where Einstein's Nobel Prize is. They let me see it the other day. I had to stand very far away when I looked at it. Also, the original theory of relativity, all 46 pages of the original theory of relativity, is at the archives of Hebrew University. On page 45, there's a bit of a grease stain. Maybe Einstein was eating a Hamantaschen, I don't know. So anyway, right now the Einstein Archives is in a very small couple offices at Hebrew University, very nondescript. But I'm happy to report they got a rather large donation recently, and they broke ground last summer, right before the war broke out, on what's going to be on the campus at Hebrew University, the world's largest Einstein museum. It will hopefully open up in a year or two, and you'll be able to visit it, and you'll be able to see these 85,000 documents. You'll be able to see all these interesting relics of Albert Einstein. One funny story. Here's an artist's rendition of what that. It's going to be on the Givat Ram campus at Hebrew University. So, one funny story about Einstein in Israel. Einstein was very friendly with Chaim Weizmann. He was a scientist. He was also friendly with David Ben-Gurion. Here's David Ben-Gurion visiting with Einstein in 1951. So Chaim Weizmann died in 1952. Right? Chaim Weizmann died in 1952, and he was the president of Israel, as we all know. And the president of Israel, was kind of like the Queen of England. It's a ceremonial position mostly. It's not a policy position. David Ben-Gurion was the prime minister, and they said, Mr. Prime Minister, who should we choose as the new president of Israel? And David Ben-Gurion, without missing a beat, says, let's ask the most famous Jew in the world. Let's ask Albert Einstein. So they send an Israeli diplomat to Einstein's house in Princeton, knock on the door, say, Dr. Einstein, we got some great news for you. We'd like you to be the next president of Israel. And he says, let me think about it, come back tomorrow. Guy comes back tomorrow, knocks on his door, Dr. Einstein, dude, what'd you decide? He says, listen, you don't want me to be the president of Israel. I don't like going to black tie affairs. I don't like getting dressed up. Here's a picture of Einstein. He's literally wearing his white sandals. You don't want me to be the president of Israel. There's a great story about Einstein. He was having some friends over for dinner, and his wife said, Albert, get dressed, we're having friends for dinner. And Albert said, listen, if my friends want to come and see me, they'll see me. If they want to see my clothes, I'll show them where the closet is. So needless to say, Einstein politely declined to ask to be the president of Israel, but he said, I'll do whatever I can to help the Zionist cause here in the States. And he did, and he spoke a lot about Zionism, raised money for Israel. As a matter of fact, in Yom HaAtzmaut 1955, the three major television networks in the U.S., ABC, NBC, CBS, asked Einstein to deliver an address for Yom HaAtzmaut that would be broadcast to the whole United States. So Einstein starts writing it. Einstein gets sick. Einstein goes to the hospital. Einstein dies. Einstein died 2 weeks before Yom HaAtzmaut 1955. He was never able to deliver that speech. However, the nurse who came into Einstein's room and found him dead found the draft of the speech on his deathbed. It was the last thing he worked on before he died, was this speech for Yom HaAtzmaut. The very last, his last breaths were writing about Zionism. And that speech is also available at they have that piece of paper at the archives. I think you can probably Google it also and see what he wrote in that speech. So I'm going to end today, and then I'll open it up for questions. I just want to circle back in case you're all wondering what happened to the story of the brain. I left you hanging there, right? The guy stole the brain, sent many pieces, but what happened to it? So I'll fill you in on that story. So many decades go by. In 1995, a group of rabbis contacted the pathologist and said, can we have the brain back? We'd like to bury it in Israel. And he said, no, I'm still doing research on it, maybe later. 1997, I think I have a picture. This is him in 1997. At this point, he cut the brain up in so many pieces. There are two big jars, one small jar. 1997, he's in his 80s. He's starting to feel guilty that he stole Albert Einstein's brain, and so he decides to return Albert Einstein's brain. So he contacts Evelyn Einstein, who is Albert Einstein's granddaughter. She lives in Berkeley, California, and this doctor lives in Princeton, New Jersey. And so what I can only imagine is America's most bizarre cross-country road trip. He rents a Buick Skylark, puts Einstein's brain in a Tupperware container in the trunk, and drives cross-country from New Jersey to California. He gets to California and meets Evelyn Einstein in a restaurant for lunch. He walks in the restaurant, leaves the brain in the trunk, and they seem to be having a nice lunch. They're schmoozing. About halfway through the meal, Evelyn gets up to use the restroom, And the doctor has a change of heart. He's like, I don't want to return it. And he runs out of the restaurant, hops in the car, drives all the way back to New Jersey with Einstein's brain. So he did not return it to Einstein. Fast forward to 2007. So we're talking pretty recently. 2007 is not that long ago. 2007, this guy is in his 90s. And now he's like, listen, I'm not going to be around forever. I need to figure out what to do with Einstein's brain. So he puts the 3 jars, puts them in a cardboard box, and brings them to a friend of his who's a younger doctor in Princeton. I say younger, he was in his 60s. Yeah, at the time, now he's in his 70s. But he was younger than this guy. He'd be welcome at the $55. See, he brings the box to the office of this younger doctor, puts the box on the floor and says, it's your problem now, and walks out of the office. So now the current caretaker of Einstein's brain is this younger doctor. Again, he's in his 60s and 70s now. He's the current caretaker of Einstein's brain. So I'm writing this book, and I have a chapter in the book about the brain, and I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could find this guy? Because he wants to remain anonymous. This new guy wants to remain anonymous. Nobody knows who he is. And so I wanted to see if I could find him. And I'm an investigative journalist. Maybe I could use my investigative skills. And so I did. I found him. I reached out to him as I was writing the book, and I said, I'd love to meet you, interview you, see the brain. No, I don't like to be public. I don't like to do publicity. But I took me 2 years to write this book, and every few months I would reach out to him and ask, please, can I come? No. Finally, a week before I turned the book into the publisher, he calls me up. And he goes, fine, you can come and see the brain on Friday. It was Wednesday afternoon. I live in Western. I was like a 6-7 hour drive. So I quickly hop in my car. I drive to Princeton. I check into the NASA Inn, the same hotel that wouldn't let Marian Anderson stay there. And I meet this guy in a parking lot, pops open his trunk, and in his trunk is the cardboard box with the 3 jars of Albert Einstein's brain. And he lets me hold, I held that small jar. He lets me hold the jar. And, throughout this whole journey, I had met so many people who had, 7 degrees of separation with Einstein. I met the daughter of someone who used to know Einstein, or my dad was Einstein's, repairman in Princeton. You meet people who know Einstein. But here I was, 0 degrees of separation, holding the last physical vestige of Albert Einstein. And I thought to myself, if I could have a conversation with Einstein, if I could meet Einstein in Olam Haba and have 5 minutes with him, what would I want to talk to him about? And what I would want to say to him is, and with this I'll close, we talked today about how he's famous for his quotations. I would want to talk to Einstein about my favorite Einstein quotation, which is this. It's 2 sentences. I have no special talent. I am only passionately curious. Right? Let's take a look at that first sentence. I have no special talent. Albert Einstein, of all people, has every right to say, I have special talent. But look at his humility for someone of Einstein's stature to say, I'm garnished, right? That's what his mom said. I'm garnished. I'm nobody. Imagine how much better the world would be today if the people in power, if the high-tech entrepreneurs and the politicians had an ounce of Einstein's humility, right? I have no special talent. And then the second part of that sentence, I am only passionately curious. We've talked a lot today about Einstein's humanitarian side. And what does it mean to be a humanitarian? It means to care about other people, right? To be curious about other people, right? If I were to walk up to you in the street, and if I were to meet you on the street, I would say, let me tell you about me. Here's what I did today. Me. Or I could be curious. Tell me about you. Tell me about your story. Tell me your struggles. I want to learn about you. And so that's what Einstein was saying was, don't just be curious, but be passionately curious about other people. And with this, I'll close. The 2 biggest lessons that I've learned from Einstein over the years of working on this book is, number 1, to have bold humility, and number 2, to always be passionately curious. And so that's my spiel. I'll stop and open it up to questions.